Good morning. Well, this is the old preacher again, and I have something special this morning that I want to. I've not done this before, but I had lots of dreams and visions in my life, and I raised my family and I worked on a job, but it's just crazy how they would come. This one time I want to speak about, I want to talk about what God did to get me in a place where I'd listen. I worked for a big farmer where I was, and in time I become a warehouse operator. I still prayed, still loved God. It was real temptation sometimes, really hard. Worked around a lot of worldly men, and I'm telling you, it's always a trial. But I come through that. Praise God. And one day the Lord, it come Christmas time, they give us a bonus. Quite wealthy, like a lot of good money for a young man my caliber. And but I love that. Every year we got that at Christmas time. And so I had a couple of kids, and one day I was standing there, I told my wife, I said, I felt this draw. We always wanted to go north in California and see the places above. And I said, let's go and borrow Mom and Dad's pickup, and we'll just go up and go on a little tour. And so Mom and Dad, they took our 2 or 3 little kids that we had, a couple of kids, I think, and they washed them for us when we left. And we was just going to look at the beautiful country above where we was. And so we got in there and took off and went up, and I just never figured on what did. And we got up there, and I went out and looked for a job. I thought, man, this is crazy. What am I going to do? And I've got a great job at home. But it was just a thing that you'll do, and sometimes I'm led by the Spirit, and sometimes it's not exactly what I want to do. And so I got this job, but it didn't work out. But we went into a little town away from Red Bluff called Daryville, California, and we rented that place. And some beautiful country, I'm telling you what. The lakes and stuff were just absolutely outstanding. I always talk to one of my wife's daughters about, she always reminds me of the swan that's would be in the lake up above Red Bluff, and they're just a beautiful country. And they'd have 4 or 5 of them swans, 6 floating around. And, just one of them things, some people you meet, you just feel they're a certain caliber person to you. And of course, all my wife's daughters are saved, and they're great prophetic people, and I love them so much. But I was going to bring out the part that I told my wife. I said, let's just borrow Mom and Dad's pickup, and we'll just go up north in California, and we'll check it out. Well, we did. Make a long story short, got this town up in Red Bluff. I just went looking for a job. That was just the way I always did. I went looking for a job, and got one, but like I say, it failed. We'd rented this house in a little old town of Daryville, about 8 miles from Red Bluff, and we had 2 or 3 kids in. I think just had a couple of kids in, but I'm not sure. It's been a long time ago. And anyway, things got tough, and when they get tough, I think you have to get going. And so that's what I did. I had a family to take care of, and that was in my thing in my life. My dad was that way, and I was that way. And so I just began to look for a job. But I want you to know it was wintertime. In California, when wintertime comes, brother, I want you to know the state back then just closed down. And so I saw that I wasn't going to find a job there. And so I had a little material laying around, and I decided to build me a prayer bench. And I got to tell you, there's not been too many places I ever lived that didn't have a prayer room in my house through all of those years. And I'm almost 80 years old. I've always had a place to pray. And I've got this little place here, and I got my music instruments, and I call this my recording room. And God has always blessed me in that. But when you don't have a dime to your name, brother, you're in trouble. And I'd have rent coming due and all of the different things, And I began to pray, and I told my wife, I said, I'm going to build me a prayer bench. And so I built me a prayer bench. was really just a long box, and then I covered it with carpet and maybe a little foam. I don't remember, and I had stuff there. And one day I just decided, man, I'm going to pray until I break this thing, because I had kids to feed and wife, and I knew that, that things are going, if I didn't get along and get a job, things are going to go worse. And so as I prayed, I went out and looked for a job. The prayer become more in depth. And some days I'd spend hours at that prayer bench. And then I decided to go on a fast. Now, I guess every man has to do it for himself. There's lots of fasts. I don't eat when I am on a fast. I might drink a little cup of coffee once in a while. The fast is up to the person. I got to tell you right now. It's to you how you're going to fast. How much you're going to give to God. What are you going to give yourself to the Lord? And so I would drink a little coffee. Well, my wife was pregnant with my son, one of my sons, and she went on that fast with me. And so the first 3 nights was havoc. Oh, at the end of 3 days, man, I just thought, well, Lord, how far can I go here? And so my wife never stopped. She was about 7 months pregnant, 8, I don't remember. And she just kept right on fasting with me. My wife didn't have a lot then. That was my first wife. I married her 47 years. And then I come to Mississippi, and I married the pastor that baptized me when I was a kid. I met his daughter back then, and then kind of found out, man, that her husband had passed away, and make a long story short, we got married. But I still my first wife, and that we got in there in a place, man, and just wasn't nothing going on. We went to a little church there, and I thought, well, maybe in the end they'll give me some hints of things to go and do, or something that I can do. And I tried a lot of things. I tried selling vacuum sweepers a little bit, and that is okay. It didn't pan out, but it's part of God's plan. Because I got to tell you, when I left there and I looked back, and I tell my wife, why did I leave? Why did I leave where I was and come up to here? And she said, I don't know. She said, I'm just with you. And so she seemed satisfied. She didn't have a lot to say, didn't talk a lot. And so we just prayed. We fasted and we prayed. Now, you can do what you want to do on your fast. I used to hear that old saying, it's your hog, you butcher however you want to. But I was raised in a family where we fast. We didn't eat anything. When you got to where you couldn't handle more, you just had to go get you a meal, or you eat a bite and went on with your fast. And it's up to you. It's what you're giving to God. That's what the angel looks at. Your angel, your ambassador to God. And so we just began that fast, and we fasted, and I prayed on that prayer bench. And I don't know how many days we've been doing that, but one day I got up and I pushed back and got up to go out and to do something else. I was going to go cook wood, I think, because we had a little wood stove. That's all we had to heat that house with. And so I pushed back, and when I did, the wall it just become a screen. And I began to see this vision. And I'm going to tell you this vision because it goes along exactly with what we're in today. Kim Clement had one just almost identical. He's seen this same thing. And I saw, as I stood, when I got up away from that prayer bench, I don't know how many days I'd been praying. When I got up from there, that wall just become a screen. And suddenly I saw these airplanes. They were big planes over a city. And as I stood there, I saw this city. It wasn't one that I knew. And those airplanes were just circling around New York City. And they had all those tall buildings there. And as I watched, I began to hear noise of things that are happening. And it was so many years ago, it's really hard. I mean, remember the dream, but it's hard for me to remember all that happened in that. But I seen those big planes, and I thought they was warplanes. I had no idea that when the towers, the planes attacked the towers, that I'd be seeing that same thing, and it come to pass. And the Lord showed that to me, and I kept that in my heart all of those years. And I remember one day I just couldn't forget it. And I kept that for many years. I don't know how many years, and up until the time of the towers. And I would draw diagrams. I'd make pictures of that. I'd do chalks of it. And when my son Joel got married, his wife was a pretty good artist. And I asked her one day, I said, I got a sketch here of what I saw back there when I was in Red Bluff, California, which is back 20 years, something like that. I don't remember how many it was. And she said, yeah, Daddy. He said, I'll do that for you. She always called me Daddy. And so I just kind of went on about my business, and I run a motel. Sometimes I had one across the street that I had to take care of, and it was very busy. And so I just went on with that, and I prayed, and I trusted God. But one day I come in, and I had my manager's suit on, and I had a suit to wear. And one of my clerks come in. She said, Dan said, you need to see this. I think you want to see it. Now, I told everybody about this dream. All these years, I told everybody about this vision. It wasn't a dream, it was a vision. And we have dreams and vision. The Word talks about that. And she said, you got to see this. And every one of them clerks that worked for me, most of them I told about this vision that I'd had. And I went into the lobby of the motel, and I looked on the TV, and the first plane had already hit one of the towers. And as I watched that second plane coming into those towers. I want you to know it hit me. This was a vision God had given me years and years before, back in 1965. And what's this, 2001, 2002 that this happened. And all of those years. And I watched that second plane come around to that tower. And I said, oh, Jesus. I said, they have a mind to destroy these towers. And I watched that as that plane hit those towers. And I had seen down below in this vision that I had, I'd seen this street down there. And the gentleman that was with the TV company, he pointed his camera down there. And I saw that same dust and smoke roll in up that street, and watched it happen to the end of it. And I said to myself, dear Jesus, this is what you showed me back there in 1965. And I showed that to people all these years, and people would just shrug. I mean, what are they going to do? What are people going to do when you have great vision or dream? You know, and you can go out and you can publish it and do what you want to. But I never felt at the time that it is what God wanted me to do. I just spoke of it. And I wouldn't forget it. I just told everybody. And so I was in my apartment, and my daughter, she's my son's wife, comes through the door and going to work. And I said, did you make that chalk that I gave you, the picture that I gave you, what I'd seen? And she looked at me, all of a sudden she said, that's what's happening right now, isn't it? And she went in there herself, and she was just so astounded that God had given me that vision. There it was happening. Well, you know, that changed our lives. It changed America's life. We've never been the same again. But you know, God gives us dreams and visions, and I don't know what you're going to say to people. You're going to publish it and I see some people do that, but a lot of people don't pay attention. But the world saw that. They seen that happening to us. And so when it was all over and it settled down, it was a travesty for America. Well, that vision didn't stop there. And the Lord, every time I'd get down and pray, I would have a continuance of that. And the second part of it was that God showed me a hill at a distance. And I stood out at the edge of Jersey City, and I would say to the south. And as I stood there one day, I looked and I saw red dirt and a grassy path in the middle of it. And it went way back beyond. And as it came to that hill, the Lord took me and raised me up. Now, the Lord showed me this quite a few years later that he showed me this. He took me and he turned me around and took me to the other side of that mountain. And when I saw that mountain, I saw a frame. I call it a frame. It was a wooden door jamb, actually, is what it was. And when I looked up, there was a black widow spider hanging on a web, hanging down from the center of that door down there. And below that was an evergreen tree. Everybody's heard about the evergreen tree. And there are a lot of prophecies and things about it. And here's that evergreen tree. And I heard most of my prophecies about the evergreen tree later. And, and studying the word and studying history and things, you'll see that. That's in your forefathers in their time. And so I saw that. And that evergreen tree was decorated with ornaments. And it had light bulbs and the silver stuff on it. Had that snow sprayed on it, had red bulbs and silver bulbs and gold bulbs on it. And it had the little decor that went around and around and around. And so as I watched that spider, it was right directly over that tree. And it was just hanging there. And suddenly that spider woke up and it come down and come onto that tree. And when it did, it began to go down in lengthways. And it went down one side first. And when it went down, it webbed all the way down and webbing on that tree. And it would come back. Now, it webbed on that tree all the way across, going down, and then it'd go over just little ways and go down and come back. It's quite lengthy. And when it had finished going down like that, it began to go across. And when it finished that webbing, it covered that tree. And there was gold boxes and silver boxes on that with a little bowl. I'm sure you've seen those before. And it covered those until all you could see was the outline of that tree and the decor on it. And when it finished, it went back up. Went back to the same position that it was in when I first saw it. And the Lord spoke to me and he said, he's covered the church. And, at that time, I didn't quite understand that. We went to a pretty neat church, and this pastor that was pastoring that church he was just a little bit older than I was. But he was my friend until the day he died. We had a relationship together. And I didn't stay in that one place, but that was a great relationship we had. And he always loved the Lord. I never knew him when he didn't. And so, I told some of them these things, and it's hard for them to understand. When somebody tells you a dream, you just take them to what you get, and sometimes we'll think about it, but it seems like people don't think much about that. But I'd watched that spider cover that over. And when he covered it over, he went back to sleep. And I was amazed by this, and I carried this for years. And I'd tell everybody about that spider covering that tree. And I just went on and I loved the Lord, and I got to tell you, I raised about 7 children, 7, 8, something like that. I had a bunch of them. And I worked for the Lord when I could, and the company that I was working for at that time, I went back and was a warehouse operator for a lot of years. And then I moved on and went into some other things, and God blessed our family. But I stayed, I stayed close to the Lord. At times I'd kind of slip away and slip into other things, but God wouldn't let me go. And so and then, there was years that I traveled on a truck and going back to the East Coast. And every once in a while, God would give me a tidbit of what I'd seen there. And I remember that I went to Jersey City, and I got to tell you, going to Jersey City, you need to know where you're going when you get there. And I remember coming down off of the freeway, and I'd never been there before. Had no idea where it was. When I got on Montgomery Street, I want you to know, I was totally lost. And I'd went through that tunnel they've got there, one of those tunnels they talk about all the time, and by the time I got to where I was just kind of shaking back behind the stern wheel, and I had a CB radio. You just couldn't get nobody on there. I kept saying, "Can somebody help me where I'm at? I'm on Montgomery Boulevard," and I just waited when suddenly a guy come through there and said, "Just follow it. You're right in front of it." And now this is many years after I saw that tree and that spider, and I'm going to try and tie these together a little bit, because when God puts you in places and you go, I never understood why I left that, because I left working for a farmer there, and he called me back one day when we come back. I was doing that warehouse stuff, and I went back and worked for him. But then eventually I got tired of that. I always wanted to drive a truck. I thought, man, that'd be so much more money and be great for my family. And so that's what I was doing. But God never let me out. Well, in this, there was a time that I managed these motels, and I did that for several years. But my relationship with the Lord stayed the same. And I still had those dreams and visions. And sometimes I just lived like a normal person, And God did a lot when I was there by Red Bluff, California. And He just blessed me. And I met a pastor there, and I knew him till the day he died. I knew all of his friends, all of those around him. And so constantly I would mention my dream that I'd had, and it was just a dream to everybody. Nobody seemed to take that in and understand that. But in 2001, we watched that happen. I was in that motel, and we watched that dream happen. Pay attention when God gives you a dream. Even though nobody seems to care or understand what you've had. And, because I've had a lot of people tell me dreams and things they had. What am I going to say? That's great. Or, man, that's really outstanding what you're seeing. I always like to hear God's people speak of what God has showed them. And so I run that motel, and my wife was very sick. I'd run for a lot of years that motel, and she became sick. And we moved out of there and actually did into a lot of things. And my wife, some years later, I was pastoring an Assembly of God church in Tule Lake, California. And my wife passed away there while I was there. And, it's hard to lose a mate. But, before I left there, and I want to get this in, my kids were mad at me because I did that. I fasted 4 days before I ever left that place. I was still at that church, still in the parsonage. And God had done a great work when I was in that place. The Lord had taken me down, and He'd given me a season that I was going to a town about 8 miles away, little town, just out in the middle of the desert, you can say, a little bit off the highway there. And my wife was sick with cancer, and so I just couldn't sit around anymore. So I would cook, and I'd make her meals, and my daughter come in later and she would cook and make meals, but I would take these and take them out to that place that was 8 miles out of town. And it was just a square city block out there and out of Tule Lake. And I'd go out there and minister, and I'd hand out that meals. I'd cook them. I had a big wood stove, and that was the blessing, brother. I cooked more meals on that old wood stove. And I would take those meals, and my wife was just laying in a bed that they had for her there in the living room. And she'd tell me, she said, "You go on and do what God's give you to do." And so I'd feel this, say, man, this is crazy for a man to love God and feel like God's sending him place, and his wife is laying there dying if God doesn't intervene in this. But she said, "You go on and do what God's give you." And so I would go, and at times I would come home. I would cook these chili and soups, and I would take them out there. And I remember the little kids there. That was called the Goose out there where it was, and it's just a compound that people that were really backslid and alcoholics and druggies and things was in that place. It was a rough place. My church used to tell me, say, "Pastor, we're afraid for you." And I pastored the Tule Lake Assembly of God. And I'd say, "Well, the Lord sent me. Don't worry, it'll be okay." sometimes I would go out and I say, God, I need some protection here. But I met a lot of people and I ministered to a lot of people. And I know it seemed almost fruitless what I was doing. And then come Christmas time. And at Christmas, we had a special deal there. And all those people that I'd worked with and fed out there and done, I say all of them, they fill my church. And up to that time, when I took that church, I only had about 9 people, but my wife is sick and we couldn't do all the full duties, that a big church would have had us do. And so I cooked those meals and took them out, and I watched my wife, and my daughter come over with me and was watching my wife as I was out there because of what I was doing. And I had a friend that was a long ways away come in and bought me a car to go on my missionary journeys. I went out there and testified to people. You may say, well, what did it profit anything? Well, if you study the Word of God, it's going to profit something. And I would come home every day after I come home, I'd have to go in prayer. It just tear me on the inside. I'd be praying for those people. Sometimes it'd be out on the street, and they would gather all around me, and I'd minister to them. And sometimes I'd have some ministerial friends, and they would come out there and stand out with me, and I'd minister to those people. But when I'd go home, I was always, it was like it talks about Christ. I carried that load, and I'd carry it home. And I'd have to go home and get down on my knees and pray over that, because it was the load of that and the loss was just tearing me up. And I would minister to them, but I'd never know if they was really receiving something off of them messages or not, because sometimes I'd be out on the street and they would just gather. There were people, this was in a compound of alcoholics and people that were on drugs and all different things in life. And sometimes when I'd walk around in that compound, they would have a army blanket, some of them, that would be just back from the front of the door. And the door would be open, but they had that blanket where they could look out. I know this seems impossible to be that way, but every house just about would have that. But I had this burden to cook that food for those kids, because them little kids out there, they'd see me come, man, I'd pull my car up, man, and they'd come running. They wanted some of them stews and chilies, and I couldn't do it every day of the week. I'd love to have, but I couldn't do it every day. But I'd go out there and do that, and then I'd minister to them. Those children's mom and dads were druggies and alcoholics. And I talked to them one day, and they said, Pastor, we love you coming and feeding our children. They do need to be fed. And when you get lost on drugs and alcohol, sometimes you lose all. For the Lord, you're supposed to give all. But when you're in this situation, you're losing all. And the children were glad to see me come. But when I'd go out there, you couldn't tell that there's a kid out there. But when I'd come out there and break things down, and when I got through and I fed them, sometimes you'd hear them playing in some place, but they would disappear. And some of the people in this place would disappear. And some of them were so tied up with demonics and different things. And, they had a guy out there that kind of running that place, and he was a druggie or something himself, And I did this for a long time. And one day, that guy told him, said, it's finished. He's not coming out here anymore. The police wouldn't go in that compound because they knew that they'd harm them if they did. They stayed, unless they had a murder, they wouldn't go in. When somebody died, then they would go inside, but otherwise they'd stay out of that. And they would carry open containers. It was a bad place. And for a while before that, there was a little part of it on the outside, about 1,000 feet away from that. And there was others there that was in this area, and I would go out there once in a while and visit them. And they would be gathered together drinking by a fire. And of course, when the preacher come, they would put that stuff up. And I would talk to them about the Lord. I didn't preach a message. I ministered to them. I talk about Jesus and his return and about giving their hearts and lives to Christ. When I would go home, I would be so loaded down that I had to go to my room and get on my knees and spend time in prayer. And, sometimes I would fast, and I had to really stay in prayer and fasting, and then go out there, and I said, God, what is this? My wife's laying out here dying. And I'm going and taking these meals out and taking them out. And this is a part of the dream that I had. It showed that place and that dream. And I've carried that a lot of years about that. But when you're living that and seeing that, you just don't know one day you're going to be able to look back and see what God was doing in that place. And yes, my wife eventually passed away. And when she did, I couldn't handle it no more. I tried for a while. But I'd met so many out there. But I wanted to let you know that God, that he had a victory out there, because the Christmas before my wife died, I only had about 9 people that were stadium members in that church. And at Christmas, when we had a meeting, did our Christmas, they had a little Christmas deal that they did. They gave out bags of oranges and apples. We didn't really do a play or anything. We just had a service. My church is full. Them people out there that I had ministered to all that time, they come to church. They fill that church up. The old people that was in there, they didn't know what to do with it. And they kind of run the building and everything, And I had some in at the altars. And for you guys that are preachers and pastors, man, this would have been the greatest time of your life. And they was just all over. And I had them down there at the altar and was down there praying them and had them give their hearts and lives to Christ. And they knew that I was the preacher that had come out there to the goose, they called it, and went out there and been preaching to them. And some of the families had gone away and they'd got saved in place. They would come back and their relatives in there, and they would speak to them about the Lord. So my church is packed full. Up until that time, I wouldn't have 15. Sometimes didn't have that many, 20. And I just preached my heart out. And I said, God, what am I doing here? They don't have enough people really need pastor. But God just kept me there. And I stayed there until my wife had passed away. But I want you to know, we saw God do some miracles in that place. And, sometimes you're beating your head against the wall trying to figure out what God wants. And I did a lot of praying, a lot of fasting, and it was so hard. But when it was over with, I left there. And when I left there, I kind of roamed a little bit, but God had a plan. And he moved me to Mississippi. And the little girl that I went with when I was in Mississippi, her daddy was a pastor there. In fact, her daddy baptized me in the R.I.D. Canal when I was 15 years old. Sweetest little old man. He loved God, man. That guy, I want you to know, he didn't have much hair on top, but I've seen him get to preaching and have 2 or 3 hairs on top of his head. I seen him jump over an altar one day. I don't know if you ever seen that cartoon of Mutt and Jeff and that little one. He every once in a while, and he looked just when he come over that altar and that hair sticking up. I said, boy, that just looks like that Mutt and Jeff cartoon where he'd run over there. But I want you to know the power of God's on when he come over that altar. And boy, when he come, he was in business. And I seen him run out that door, and there was a bunch of these young guys that run out with him, and they just run around that church and said that side door come on. And there was a bang brother. When he did, he just come through that door, run right back up to that podium, and begin and kept on preaching. Them guys come right in with him, went in and sat down. I thought, wow, man, this is something. Now I wasn't but about 16 years old then, 15, 16. I seen a lot when I was young. But I began to see the things that God did. Now, my family raised me. They were gospel. They were Christians. And my mother was a preacher, and I got a lot of gospel. When I got older, I had to make my own gospel is what I had to do. I had to spend my time coming before the Lord. And when things got tough, I had to get tough. And I had to get on my knees and just pray. And, when I was doing all that fasting and praying, it's not easy. And, a lot of people, they go on a lot of type of fast, and it's okay. It's what you give to God. But all my life, my mom and dad were in ministry, and we never eat nothing when we fasted. We just fasted, and that's what it did. And, we was on a 10-day fast. And pretty soon that fast, I got a little weak. I look back and remember that because, when I was doing that other stuff sometime, boy, I'm telling you what, I look back and say, man, when things went bad, I went on a long fast, and I'd watch God work, man. When I did that fast, we didn't have nothing in the house but flour and water. And I looked out the drive, and here's a car, and some people come out there, and they come up to my door. And we went to the little church back there, but nobody said a lot to us, and we'd been introduced, and they come in and brought a box of groceries, And they said, and this little man said to me, he said, I've never done this for my life. He said, God told me to bring you $10. And when they brought that $10, they brought a box of different stuff. They brought that in there, and the next day they come back and brought us a big box of canned goods. And we was out of fuel there for fires there. They had a kid coming. He went out and got me a load of wood and brought it in. So we had wood fire and had one of them wood burning stoves. And my wife, she's very pregnant, and she'd cook on that stove. But this was something that God did to prepare us for the ministry as we went across from there and went to other places and places where I could minister. And I'm a man, you can't stop me from talking about the Lord. I talk about the Lord wherever I go. And I believe it says he that winneth souls, his word talks about that, about the soul winner and the place he is with God. It wasn't because it said that. It says he that winneth souls is wise. And you may think I'm crazy, but I'll guarantee you pick up a little wisdom when you're out winning souls. Because I want to know, if you go out there and win souls, you're going to run into the worst. When I run the road, I run in with the worst. And I can remember a young man one day, and I picked him up in Omaha, Nebraska, as I was crossing the line out of Iowa over into Omaha. And he was out there hitchhiking, and I stopped and picked him up. I was hauling steel back and forth across America, and I picked him up. I was in a bad mood. And I told that young man, I said, I don't feel like talking. You can sit over there, and I'll take you as far as I can take you, wherever you're going. And I said, I just want to drive, and I don't want nobody to bother me. And he just kind of shook his head and said, that's fine. And man, we crossed that river into Omaha and crossed over and went out there and took him, and I took him all the way through Nebraska. But I never shut up. I ministered to that boy all the way across Nebraska. When we got over that exit, it was about a quarter mile to where that street ended on that exit there, because he said, you can let me off here. And went out the end of that exit. When he got out, he turned around and he said, everything you said was exactly what I needed. And I got to tell you, friends, I did not know. My children that knows that my ministry, I didn't know what I'd said. But I talked about the Lord. And this young man, he said, it's just exactly what I needed. And when he shut that door and I went on across, got back on the freeway, I began to take this, saying, God, what was it? I thought I just talked all the way, but I didn't. I preached all the way across. I didn't talk to him. I ministered to him. It was the Holy Spirit that was doing that. And, so that was kind of the thing that I had going through life, and when I pastored that little church in Tule Lake, my wife, she didn't know she had cancer then, but later she found out that she was sick with cancer. And I didn't know what to say to God. I didn't know what to say to her. And so I just prayed, and that just took me on. And when I went back, and I'd known this little girl, this little blonde, I've known her from the time I was baptized, where her daddy baptized me. And went back over there, and it just, I got to tell you, it worked out in such a way. But I married her, and she had been married to my best friend. He passed away. And the Lord brought me in here. So what I'm doing today is a product of all of those things as I come across there. And I come to this place. I preached a lot of messages. I can tell you I preached some great messages in my life, but I don't remember them. I don't remember any great messages. I won a lot of souls to the Lord. And I've got to tell you, there's a danger, though, a danger thing in this when you go out and you preach. I ministered while I was on the truck, a tanker truck. And I don't know how many years I was there, several years that I was on this tank truck and I worked for this outfit. And I run over this place called the Santiam Pass. And man, I did a lot of preaching. I won a lot of souls to the Lord as I was running up that Santiam Pass back and forth. I would pick them up. And when I pick up my load coming from Portland, I would pick up kids out on the highways. When I run cross country, I'd pick up kids up on the highway. And I had some gospel things that I had, but I had some little slides and stuff that I had made when I was in Israel, and I let them read them. And they'd do that, and I'd stop and buy them a meal. I used to tell my co-pastor in church that I pastored there once, and I said, you know what? They told me, said, Brother Lee, said, we need to do something. Said, our church is just kind of in a standstill. And I said, I'll give you the money. You go out on the freeway out here. And I said, you pick up those kids out there and tell them about the Lord and buy them a meal. And I said, you'd be surprised. It scares people when you talk about picking up others. But I was covered by the blood. I never had a problem when I was out there. And I didn't pick up everybody. I just something I'd feel the Spirit. And I'd pick them up and I would minister to them. You can't believe the things God did out on that highway and the things that you go through when you're going across America. And anyway, I wanted to say that when we saw those towers, that was a change in our lives. When those planes hit those towers, they changed our life. They changed ministry. And ministry was different after that. And I know some people don't realize it, but God gave us a different message as we preached. I carried that all the way to Tule Lake where my wife passed away. That's been several years ago. And today, I'm married to the preacher's daughter. All those years passed. She'd married my best friend, and he'd passed away. And so when we got together, her daddy had been pastor all her life. She's on fire with the Lord. Praise God, man. She blessed me when I married her. God blessed me. We blessed each other. We never quit telling people about the Lord. That's something we've never quit. I just give you a little foretaste of that. But I wanted to remind you in this thing, I saw that spider up on top of that tree. We're seeing a lot of things happen in America now. And so, you know, I could tell you a lot of things in here. I could give you a lot of suggestions. But my best suggestion is if life is not going right for you, get a hold of God. You know, we walk Sue and I were in a little house next to there, and we walk almost every day. We walk out there. We carry tracts with us, and we got the message with us. And when God opens the door, we minister. Now, you wouldn't believe, man, how many times we minister to people, and they just need God. And I had a lady one time who's going to commit suicide, and I walked past her. She's sitting up in the car on the side, and the Lord spoke to me and said, she's going to commit suicide. And I'd already went past her. He said, go back. And I turned around and I walked back up close to her car, and she was up on the hill. And I said, you know, the Lord tells me you're about to commit suicide. And she looked at me and her eyes got big. And I said, are you? She said, yes. And I walked up to that car. And God loaded me for bear, brother. I want you to know God had given me the very things that she needed. Now, that's been several years ago, and that young lady's still in that house, had her kids, and it's still there. Every once in a while we walk by, we'll tell her, praise the Lord. And we minister like you know, we just take Jesus with us everywhere we go. And it's been a great life, and what a great ministry. And I've preached in a lot of churches. I've pastored churches. But I never got the victory as I get when I go out and I tell people about the Lord. And Sue and I, we just hardly ever go out there that we don't meet somebody on the street. The people know us. I had a young man come out here a while back, and he said, I've watched you all this time, you and your wife, walk every day out there. And he said, you know, it made me know I need to make a change in my life, because he said, I heard what you was doing. And he'd come to tell us that. And so many times we run into people and minister to them. We watch God change lives. And everywhere we go, my wife's just like I am, brother. I want you to know, she'd preach a message. And I was telling a little old gal the other day, I said, she's come up to me, and I said, I was talking to her, and I said, I may preach a little bit, but I said, you see that little girl over there? I said, brother, she can preach a message. About that time, she come over, and we was in a shoe store. I'm going to tell you this, and then I'm going to quit. We was in a shoe store. This young lady was sitting down on a little stool, and she just sat there, was just looking. And I went up, I can't help it, man. I just got this thing in me. I got a person just in a place. I want to go up and find out whether they need God. And so I didn't go up and say, you need God. I walked up and just began to talk to her a little bit, you know. And I told her, I said, you know, I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor, and I'm a preacher. And I said, but that little woman over there, I said, brother, she'll preach you a sermon. And about that time, here she comes. I said, there she comes. I said, you just wait and listen. She'll preach a sermon, brother. And she come over there. And when she come over there, we looked down and we saw more than just that young lady sitting there. She's a black girl, about probably 25, maybe 30 years old. And she's sitting there. And we talked to her a little bit. And I reached over and I touched her shoulder. When I did, she began to shed tears. My wife walked over there. We laid hands on her and began to pray for her. We kind of looked around to see who all was looking. It's a big shoe store. And man, we prayed for her. And man, I'm telling you what, that gal, she said, I've been this way for 15 years. And we said, in the name of Jesus, we rebuke that Satan. You leave this young lady. You turn her loose. You let her go. That's what we do with the devil. We rebuke him. We don't take him into anything. We don't need him in our churches. We don't need him in our associations. My house, I don't want nobody in there swearing and cussing, telling dirty jokes and all that stuff, brother, because I'm free of that, and I don't want to have it. I have them try it sometimes and say, brother, I'm sorry, man, this is just not it. And we just minister to everybody in this house and track, and we have for the last 15 years that I've been here. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope it give you an idea of what's happening today when you look out in this and what I've told you here in these dreams and visions, things that happen, and where I've met people. They're so hungry for God. And you know what the problem is? Not everybody goes to church. They're out there on the highways and byways, and the word speaks about going in the highways and byways, and that's where the wife and I go. We don't always work in this housing tract. We went on missionary programs and went out to area out here out of town, man, and we ministered there for, man, I don't know how many weeks we ministered those people out there. And I'll tell you what, it was the towns of black folks. And brother, I want you to know God worked in that place, and it was just amazing. Just don't have time to tell you all the things that we did out there. But if you love God, don't be afraid to share it. We have a lot of sons and daughters there. My wife does in this place, and I got them over in Oregon. I got them over there, and their mamas preaches that word, and they know it. And I want you to know, after all these years, I've been here 15 years, and they're just like her, man. They minister that word, and their husbands back them up in that thing, and they talk to people about the Lord. And we see many miracles. When you go to the Word, you see those miracles. So let God have your time. They talk about tithes and offerings. Give God your time. Give your hearts and lives to Christ. And just get down and pray. Say, Lord, come into my heart. Fill me with your love and your spirit. You will be a changed person when you do that, especially when you see them tears roll. That young lady we prayed for, the tears just roll. And I'm telling you what, my wife, she'd look around, see who was watching that. But I want you to know, we had a service right there. And we take communion every morning. We take our communion. I can feel the singer going out. And we see these things coming about. We minister to more people. God loves you. Love God. And love him and serve him. Thank you for your time. Well.